this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. I guess probably after the past 2 weeks, I've come to view the word suspicious in a whole new light. And granted, I've been at this quite some time. And I'm a grown man. I should have known better. But with the death of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, that term was thrown around initially by the police in New Mexico. And then it took off like wildfire with the media. I guess we could spend an entire episode talking about how the media will hook into something and won't let it go. And all you're left with is a memory of things that seemingly are unanswered because you never could quite get past that one word, suspicious or questionable. But what we are left with is the passing of one of the greatest actors, certainly in my lifetime, and by all appearances, a very fine man as well. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Well, Dave, we finally have some answers relative to the death of Gene Hackman, and more specifically, his cause of death. His manner, for my money, has never been in question. I have not felt that necessarily that there was anything particularly suspicious about Gene Hackman's death, but unfortunately, we went down that road, didn't we? Relative to,
I think really it was because of not that he died at the age of 95 inside his home, but it was the fact that his wife, who was 31 years younger than him, also was dead inside the home, where he was found inside what they have referred to as the mudroom. I have never referred to my utility room as a mudroom, but now I will. I actually, Joe, when I first saw that and mudroom, I thought it was like a room that, you know, how they have mud walls in some Oriental homes. I thought that's what it was. I thought his wife, whatever. That's what I thought. I didn't know it was actually a room where you kick the mud off your shoes room. So anyway, but she was found in the bathroom. So Gene's found in there, and he's in it appeared based on what we were told that maybe he was getting dressed to go outside when he had some type of cardiac event that caused him to die in the mudroom. Meanwhile, his wife of many years is dead in the bathroom with pills spilled around her, and a dog in I'm guessing a carrying cage thing, also dead. And I think that was why there was some suspicion, air quotes, on the deaths, because they both died at the same time, 31-year age difference. I think that's why there were questions about what really happened. I think you were very straightforward from the very beginning that it wasn't suspicious. There's probably a reasonable explanation. And I'm wondering now, do we have that reasonable explanation? Yeah,
we do. I was never inclined to believe that, someone entered this private gated community in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and specifically went to Gene Hackman's home and decided to take the lives of both of these people. I thought that was bizarre in and of itself. Some people had actually, put forth that they thought that might be what happened. And then we had the carbon monoxide. Now, was that plausible? Yes, it is plausible. And that does happen. It happened in cases I've worked. It's happened over the years for a variety of friends of mine from all across the nation, where you're going to, if you're a medical legal death investigator for any period of time, you're going to catch a case involving multiple deaths from carbon monoxide. It's going to happen. You can't avoid that because it's everywhere, and you get a high concentration, and it will end your life very, very quickly. But when that cleared up, and they knew that there was nothing to it, and they're not prattling on about marks on the body or anything like that, I knew that it had to be something natural. And so my mind began to drift toward this idea of, and here, let me give you some inside baseball information. I can say it now, but I'd had one news person, and eventually it became two, that said to me before it was ever made public that he had dementia. And when I heard that, and it's something that is not to be unexpected. I mean, he's 95 years old. Come on, give me a break. He's 95. And as it turns out, he's got Alzheimer's. And so when I heard that, I knew that what we were faced with here was probably going to be a death or deaths that, kind of cycled around some kind of natural manifestation. With Betsy, that was the big question. It wasn't so much Mr. Hackman, okay? But with his wife, that was a big question because, as you had stated, what was that age difference again? It's like 30.
31.
What?
She was 64. He was 95.
Yeah, 31 years younger. Unless she's got some kind of really bad heart history, or maybe she's got some kind of cerebral blockage or something where she's going to have a stroke. I couldn't put my finger on it. It was so bizarre, how she could just fall over dead. But one clue I think that we had was the fact that she was in the bathroom, and in the bathroom with those pills scattered all about. And it was the fact that they were talking about how many pills were scattered about on the counter and everything. And someone had asked me, is this an overdose? And I'm thinking, well, if you overdose on medication, it stands to reason there would be more in than out, if you know what I mean. There wouldn't be pills scattered all about. I mean, to the point where they're talking about that they were laying everywhere. You would think that if that was the intention here, that you wouldn't see all of these pills. They would have been ingested. So it sounds like it was some kind of sudden event. She had, from my understanding, she had just returned with the dog from the vet, if I'm not mistaken. This poor animal had undergone some type of treatment at the veterinarian's office, and that's the reason the dog was caged up. How they want you to keep the animal isolated and keep them contained. And when she was seen out and about, she is now, she's been seen, she's traveling around town all masked up. We know that she had gone to CVS. We know that she had gone to the farmer's market. Okay. We know that she had actually gone to the pet store. So you've got her making all of these locations. And I think that on the last day that she was known to have been alive, which was the 11th, I believe, that's when the last activity on her card, her swipe card to get access to the gate, getting back, that's the last time that they had recording. I think it was like just after 5 p.m. that day. And then she rolled back up to the house at that point in time.
Interesting how we can track people by our electronics now, whether it's a pass card or our phone, or in this case, even a pacemaker is involved. But I want to back up to something you mentioned, dementia and Alzheimer's disease. I kind of thought that one led to the other. What is the difference, or is there? What are we talking about when somebody has dementia?
Dementia is kind of a broad-ranging term, and there could be, but Mr. Hackman had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and here's the thing: they didn't just diagnose him. It wasn't just his diagnosis wasn't merely Alzheimer's disease. His diagnosis was advanced Alzheimer's. Okay.
So that means years in development.
Oh yeah. And it's going to be variable dependent upon what type of treatment an individual is undergoing. And I think some of your genetic predispositions relative to your survivability, I think, because it's not going to end well either way. And with him, it had been, because this is a guy, and I was doing some reading. Do you know that up until I know that back in his 60s, he was still boxing. He would, yeah. Now it may have just been shadow boxing, but he had a workout partner, trainer. He could box. He had boxed in the Marine Corps, all those years ago, back in the 50s. And he still had muscle memory for that. His trainer is even quoted as saying, he knew the positions of the feet. He knew how to strike. And he could move really well. He played golf. He did Pilates. He did yoga. So this is not a guy, and he watched what he ate. This is not a guy that didn't take care of himself. But it's the encroachment of time, though, Dave. Yeah.
Well, when he retired, a lot of actors, they don't actually announce a retirement, although recently we have had a few do it. But when Gene Hackman stopped performing, I remember it happening because I enjoy his work. I enjoyed some of his last work in film, and Heartbreakers comes to mind, where he plays the head of a tobacco company. He's always smoking. Smoking's a bit. It's just a funny guy. But I loved I just really enjoyed his performances. And when he announced he was going to stop acting and he was going to take time writing, something that he enjoyed doing and wanted to do. It's just, you hit that age. I mean, with actors, usually they just kind of fade, because their parts dry up. But we've had Gene Hackman walking away. I think Jack Nicholson did the same thing. Once Gene Hackman said, I'm done, Nicholson followed not far behind. That's why at the 50th anniversary for SNL, when Jack Nicholson showed up, it was such a big deal. He introduced Adam Sandler's segment. And it wasn't a big, long, drawn-out thing. He was sitting in his position in the seat, but he did introduce Adam Sandler. And Jack said it was because he was having trouble remembering lines and things like that. That's why he quit performing several years ago. But we recently had the Bruce Willis, where he has something in the family, of the dementia family, that is causing him to lose his ability to communicate, to speak. And he was filming a movie in Alabama, just outside of Birmingham, in Bessemer. And a couple of friends of mine were actually working on the set, and they were talking about how he was having to be fed his lines a lot.
Yeah, I'd heard that from a separate source of mine. That was probably 3 years ago, from L.A., a guy that's a producer I'm really good friends with. And he had mentioned how they would have to use cue cards, or they would have one of those tiny little things in their ear, where they could be fed that way. Right.
And I thought that was, at the time, it was kind of positioned as he's so lazy, he doesn't even bother to learn his lines. Yeah. And then it was not long after that last time that they came out and said, he is suffering from this. So in the last few years of catching these types of things, it kind of made me wonder what was going on with Gene Hackman. And as you mentioned, dementia and then advanced Alzheimer's. Like I said, I think a lot of us don't know the difference between those.
Here's one of really interesting things about this condition is that did you know that as this is a degenerative disease, and so as it progresses, the actual cells of the brain begin to diminish. They actually grow smaller and smaller. And so at autopsy, the brain will actually weigh less. Say, for instance, as opposed to somebody of the same age group that is not suffering from this condition, the brain will actually be smaller. And isn't that interesting? Because many times you this kind of, it's almost like a childlike regression, that you see where individuals that have this malady, they become. It starts off where they're having. They can't put thoughts together very well. They can't think things through like they once could, and they'll present with being confused. And then over a period of time, they do become more childlike until they're almost infantile. And that's the really horrible thing about this case. The horror of the fact that your bride, who you've been married to all these years, passes on, and that you might not have any awareness that she's left. I think most of us can look back over our lives, and we have these moments in time where we're confused about things, or we don't know what to do next, and we can't find the words for something. I mean, just insert whatever phrase you want to into that. In the case of Gene Hackman, this is a constant fight that he had been fighting for a long, long time. The thing that really sent a chill up and down my spine with Betsy was the fact that, Dave, she had probably, and I really thought this was more accurate than initially what people were saying. I think that because they kept using the term mummified, she had been down for, in my opinion, for several days prior to him passing on. And now we do know that his pacemaker actually registered his last activity on the 17th. And let's do the math on this. Her last activity that we know of, okay, with the card key for the front gate to the neighborhood was on the 11th. So I don't know, 5-6 days perhaps, that, assuming that when she walked through the door that she passed on at that moment in time. And then you combine that with what I believe was his total dependency upon her. He had to have her, Dave, to survive. I mean, truly to survive. He needed her guidance. Again, I think I mentioned this in our initial episode about their deaths. There was that image where you could see him walking or crossing the street, and he was holding on to her, depended upon her to, ambulate from one side of the street to the other to get her about. And that's got to be so very difficult for a man that was so virile. As a matter of fact, on screen, he could be very scary. He looked like he could, snap your neck if he wanted to. I'm thinking about Mississippi Burning right now, and those those, if you've never seen that movie, you just need to see the one scene in there involving him and Michael Rooker. It will really, that's a great summation of how much power he had. It is incredible to see him. And he was like that in all of his roles. You always felt like there was something just beneath the surface with him that was ready to explode at any moment in time. And he had this kind of menacing laugh that he would give, like, yeah, kind of like I could never do it justice, but it was just, you always felt like he was right there. But then at the end, I believe that he probably, Dave, unfortunately, probably wandered around that house for several days with her lying in that bathroom. And there was nothing he could do. Nothing. He's in a childlike state and completely incapable of taking care of himself. I'm surprised he actually maybe lasted as long as he did. That might go to how tough he was, but this is how I know this. Did you know that at autopsy, they checked his stomach? There was no food whatsoever. He had not eaten. And that gives you an indication that, he's already in a diminished state. And then, both physically and psychologically, and then to go without food, that's just one more nail in the coffin, Dave.
I was reading the BBC did an article about it, and it says this: actor Gene Hackman was alone. The two-time Academy Award winner didn't make any calls and missed meals. Medical experts say it's possible the 95-year-old, who was in declining health and suffering from advanced stages of Alzheimer's disease, did not even realize his wife of more than 30 years was dead in the home where he was living. If he did, experts tell the BBC he likely went through various stages of confusion and grief trying to wake her up before the disease caused him to become distracted or too overwhelmed to act, a process that likely repeated for days before he too died. It's exactly what you described, Joe, of not being able to understand or maintain focus enough to do anything about it and even care for himself.
Yeah. Wow. And, I don't know. I don't want to wax too ethereal here, but, talking about dying of a broken heart. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it and being trapped. And that's the way a lot of people describe the disease itself, as being trapped. And the fact that he was in there, I think that that's the most, and for me in this case, that's the biggest takeaway, because they lived a life that kept them isolated to a great degree, where I think that as he had gotten up in age, and matter of fact, one of the articles that I'd read, where they were interviewing this friend of his that was a trainer, said that he was really conscious of the way he looked now, and he's an actor. Obviously that says a lot, that he didn't even like looking at old films because he knew that he wasn't that person anymore.
Wow.
And
makes sense for all like that.
It does make sense.
What about his wife, Joe? I mean, we know that he was in a diminished capacity. We know that, dementia and advanced Alzheimer's, and he was 95, but his 64-year-old wife, how did she die? What happened to her? And why were they both in various stages of mummification when they were found?
Yeah, I don't, again, even though the record itself says, or the let me see, what's the proper phraseology? The affidavit for the warrant actually alludes to the fact that she was beginning to mummify, and it said that he was similar. Well, I don't know what similar means. That's not a medical legal report. That's not the way we would have written it in my field, because you take both individuals.
The police officer write that?
Yeah, probably the investigator that was trying to get the warrant, and I understand why they wrote it. And it's their purpose is different than our purpose, but still, I don't know how valid that is as far as the assessment of his remains. I suspect that they did not appear the same, absolutely the same. I think that he did not show as much postmortem change as she did. Now, there would have been some, obviously, but not to the degree that she was, okay? And so I think we have to take that with a grain of salt, relative to how they appeared when compared to one another. And I don't know that that's necessarily a great comparison or not. But in the case of Betsy Arakawa's cause of death, I was struck by something so out of left field, and many of us were. We never saw it coming. And the origins of her death lie in a tiny rodent. Many, many moons ago, when I was going through training in the Army, we were placed on the U.S.-Mexico border. And again, this is a long time ago. This is before the days of what we're currently experiencing with illegal immigration. And we had set up on a site where we would surveil an area for a period of time. And during that time, I saw all manner of wildlife. Even saw a sidewinder, which I'd never seen before, which was really bizarre. But then my friends noticed that were out there, and I finally saw one, these little mice that were out there. And the thing about these little mice is that they had really long tails, and that they could hop. And when I say hop, I mean like really hop high in the air, and they would eat food if you would give it to them. One of my friends actually enticed one of these mice in the air with a crumb of food from sea rats to jump up and take this cracker from him. And as it turns out, that little species of mice plays into the death of Betsy Arakawa. And I guess by default, plays into the death of Gene Hackman, Dave.
Because she was unable to care for him after she passed. Wow.
Yeah, it's like the old poem, for the one of a nail, a horseshoe was lost. One of a horseshoe, a horse was lost. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, the way life intersects that way, Dave?
It's called Hantavirus.
Yeah.
I remember a movie that came out years ago with Dustin Hoffman and Rene Russo, Morgan Freeman, and Donald Sutherland. And it was called Outbreak.
Yeah.
And the hantavirus was mentioned in New Mexico. What actually is that as a respiratory disease as it goes? What is it? How does it? I mean, I have no clue other than a movie.
Not many people do. You obviously, those in the know, and particularly in people that are epidemiologists and people that study these bizarre kinds of diseases that are out there, they would be up to snuff, as they say, on this particular disease. It's not something that is encountered. And let me frame it for you even with a tighter focus. New Mexico is considered to be a hotbed for hantavirus. And I think that they might experience maybe 29 deaths per annum, I think, which is pretty significant, but it's not even like the flu. Okay. I mean, it's not that, the circumstances have to be just right in order for this to end in some kind of terminal event. The disease itself is actually spread through 3 ways. And the number one carrier is carried by rodents, but according to their public health people in New Mexico, which, by the way, I got to tell you this, for folks that don't know, did you know that the Public Health Service in the state of New Mexico actually administers the state medical examiner's office, which is state medical examiner is not affiliated with law enforcement, which I think is grand because it is a scientific pursuit. They consider it to be public health, and it's catch-all. And I think that it's great. So they work on what's called a medical investigative model. And I love it. Absolutely love it. That it's separate from any kind of law enforcement agency because, the lion's share of deaths that all of us work in my field are not homicides. Lion's share are, natural deaths. And we work accidents and, we're the ones that work all the accidents. We're the ones that work all of the suicides and the homicides and everything else. But they view it through a different lens than we do. So anyway, the state health department actually, has talked about how it's been identified as a hotbed for this. And CDC has identified it as a hotbed for this virus. But the way it's spread is three ways: either saliva of the rodent, urine of the rodent, or feces. And they ran pretty extensive testing at the home. Inside of this home, this is a big house, man. It's a really big place, and they didn't see any evidence of mouse droppings inside of the house, according to what they're saying. Okay. However, when they went out to the outbuilding, they did see this. They did see mice droppings out there, and so let's just say that Betsy, and I don't know this for a fact, okay, but let's just say, and she's primary caretaker here, so I'm sure that she busies herself through the day cleaning and those sorts of things. Maybe she went out to the outbuilding, okay? This is one possible scenario, just one. Went out to the outbuilding, and she had a broom in her hand, and she began sweeping up out there, okay? Well, as she's sweeping up, those remnant of feces that are out there suddenly become aerosolized. So if you think about, have you ever been standing by a window with the sun beaming through and you can see the dust particles? Okay. That's essentially aerosolized. Okay. Dust particles that you're seeing. Well, if she stirs this up with a broom, for instance, all right, and while she's out there, she's got to breathe, right? While she's out there, takes a deep breath. Well, guess what she's just done? She has just taken the stuff up, and the mice are carrying this virus within them, and it's in their excrement, okay? And now she's introduced this into her system. Well, we don't know how long she had this. This is really weird because, they say that I was reading about this because I got to tell you, Dave, I've never worked a case of Hantavirus. Never, ever. Right. Did you know that the incubation period, you're going to be amazed by this, the incubation period is 1 to 8 weeks. That's how, this is how big this number is, 1 to 8 weeks. I know, man. So you're thinking it takes that long for this thing to incubate? And then I guess begin to present. I don't know. We do know that ever since COVID, or in the midst of COVID, they did self-isolate during that period of time. They were both wearing masks. That's been documented. And I don't know if Betsy had chosen to mask up permanently or whatever the case might be, but when she was going about to all these stores, she was wearing a mask. Okay, we're talking about that last day of that activity on that card reader. And she makes it back home. Well, this thing is eating at her. She's carrying this virus in her body. But maybe this is kind of a reach for me. because I'm a romantic at heart, but I'm just thinking she knows that she has a job to do. She loves her husband. They've been in a committed relationship for a long, long time. She is his caretaker. She knows that she's got to get home and take care of him at all costs. And she just pushes through. You know, I don't know about you. My wife, though, I will say this. It doesn't matter how bad my wife feels. If one of us, when my children were still at home, and obviously I'm still here, she could have a fever of 100. And if we're sick, she's going to put us ahead of herself. That's just the way she rolls. Listen, I don't care how it comes off sounding. There's something about women that's the way they are. Thank God. Yeah. I mean, you know, if it wasn't for my wife, I'd be dead probably. You know, she just, you know.
She did save your life in January. That's for sure.
Yeah, she did. She did. No doubt about it.
Kim, and she some needs of to wear a cape. You know, that's what we ought to do. We got to get a cape for Kim.
Well, yeah, part of that goes to her cussing out medical staff at the hospital for failing to take care of me.
It gets things done. But, you know, back to this, if she's got Hantavirus, she is probably not, you mentioned, she's not feeling her best. She goes to the drugstore. She's picking up whatever, and she's dealing with
we still don't have an answer to that, by the way. We don't know if there were, if it was meds for him or if it was meds for her or if it was something over the counter. She went to CVS. I mean, we all go to CVS, you know. Or we all have been to CVS one time or another. Yeah. And here's one other thing. Mr. Hackman was, he was taking diltiazem, and it is a medication that is used for hypertension and also angina. And he's got really bad hypertension, and he's had it for years. As a matter of fact, autopsy revealed that he had pretty severe kidney disease. And the kidney disease that he had was hypertensive changes. And when you see a kidney that has had these hypertensive changes, it's very, see, how can I describe it? Most of the time, well, we all know what a kidney bean looks like, right? Well, kidney beans kind of had a smooth, glistening appearance to them when you see them. Hypertensive changes in the kidney can actually give the kidney the appearance. It gives it not appearance. It actually gets these kind of nodular spaces all over it. I mean, when you see it, it looks diseased. All right. Well, he had that going on. And Dave, if he had missed this medication on top of not being, not drinking water and, you know, not taking on any kind of nourishment, it's a death sentence. I mean, it really is at 95. So that's another added thing to this. So, you know, we know that she went to CVS and she's walking around with Hantavirus, and I can't even begin to imagine how that feels. I know this, it attacks the lungs. That's numero uno. That's where it goes.
So as she is getting worse, apparently, you know, her own health, and we know that she was in the bathroom. We know the pills are spilled. She dies. Gene Hackman is wandering around the house, not able to focus on anything, not even able to provide nourishment for himself. What is he doing? I mean, is he going to sleep? Is he going to, do we know anything? I mean, I'm trying to figure out, because based on what we know, I can just picture this incredibly famous, old, wealthy man, a good guy from all reports.
Right.
And his last days are spent not even being able to feed himself, walking around the house.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And you think about, you know, what's really important with patients with his condition is routine. But there's that one kind of stalwart thing in his life that's now absent, and that's Betsy. You know, she is the linchpin in every aspect of his life, guiding him about, walking him about, you know, feeding him, giving him water, giving him comfort. And we hate to think of this diminished state that he was in. We hate to think that he suffered it all. We hate to think that Betsy suffered it all. But we do know this. They passed away together, days apart, but yet together in their home, in a home that they had built over many years. And they are now together forever in eternity. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.